The universe didn't have to play by rules. Reality could have been pure chaos, random events with no pattern or predictability, moments disconnected from each other with no logical relationship. Every location in space could have operated under different principles. Every instant in time could have followed different laws, but that's not what we observe. Instead, the universe follows rules, precise mathematical rules that hold everywhere and always. This fact is so fundamental, so obvious, that we rarely stop to appreciate how deeply strange it is. Michio Kaku has spent his career working within these rules, manipulating the equations that describe them, using them to predict phenomena that were later confirmed. And the more he's studied these rules, the more convinced he's become that their existence demands an explanation that science alone cannot provide. The universe has rules because, he argues, there's a cosmic intelligence that established them. God, in other words, explains why the universe isn't chaos. This is one of the most profound questions in all of philosophy and science. Not what are the rules, physicists have mapped those in extraordinary detail. Not how do the rules work, that's what experiments reveal. But why are there rules at all? What makes the universe rule-governed instead of random? And why these particular rules instead of others? These questions push beyond the boundaries of empirical science into metaphysics. Yet they're questions that the practice of science itself raises constantly. Start with the most basic observation. The universe is orderly. The same causes produce the same effects. If you perform an experiment in Tokyo and someone performs the identical experiment in New York, you get the same results. If you perform an experiment today and repeat it next year, assuming conditions are truly identical, the outcome doesn't change. This consistency, this reliability, is what makes science possible, but it's not logically necessary. Reality could have been different every time, in every place. Kaku points out that ancient peoples recognized this mystery. They saw order in nature, the regular cycles of seasons, the predictable motions of celestial bodies, the consistent properties of materials, and they attributed this order to gods. The sun rises because Apollo drives his chariot across the sky. Rain falls because Zeus wills it. Crops grow because Demeter blesses them. These explanations were wrong about the mechanisms, but they were asking the right question. Why is nature orderly rather than chaotic? Modern science answered the how question. The sun rises because Earth rotates. Rain falls because of atmospheric thermodynamics. Crops grow through photosynthesis and cellular biology. But these answers assume the existence of rules, laws of motion, laws of thermodynamics, laws of chemistry. They don't explain why those laws exist. Science has effectively replaced specific divine interventions with general natural laws, but the existence of laws themselves remains unexplained within the scientific framework. Some scientists and philosophers argue that this question is meaningless or unanswerable. The universe just has rules, and that's the end of it. It's a brute fact requiring no further explanation. But Kaku finds this deeply unsatisfying. Science is built on the assumption that everything has an explanation, that we can always dig deeper and ask why. To suddenly declare that the most fundamental feature of reality, its rule-governed nature, is beyond explanation seems like giving up precisely when we reach the most interesting question. The alternative is to recognize that rules imply a rule-maker, not necessarily in a personal anthropomorphic sense, but in the sense that order requires an ordering principle. Randomness doesn't generate rules. Chaos doesn't organize itself into mathematical laws. The existence of universal, eternal, precise rules governing all of reality suggests that something with the capacity to establish rules must underlie existence, and that something, Kaku argues, is most coherently understood as cosmic intelligence or God. Consider what rules actually do. They constrain possibility. Without rules, literally anything could happen at any moment. An electron could suddenly become a planet. The speed of light could change from 1 second to the next. Gravity could reverse direction randomly, but rules say no, these things cannot happen. They define what is possible and what is impossible. They channel reality along specific pathways rather than allowing all conceivable pathways. This constraining function is creative, not restrictive, just as the rules of chess, which seem restrictive, actually make the game possible and interesting. The rules of physics make complex phenomena possible. Without rules constraining what can happen, There would be no stability, no structure, no complexity. Atoms couldn't form because their components would behave randomly. Stars couldn't burn because fusion wouldn't follow consistent patterns. Life couldn't emerge because biological processes require reliable chemistry. The rules, by limiting what can happen, paradoxically enable rich and complex things to happen. This is a profound insight. Constraint enables creativity. Limitations make sophistication possible. The universe's rules are the foundation on which all complexity is built. And Kaku argues this shows intentionality. Random processes don't generate constraints that enable complexity. That requires something like planning, design, intelligence. The mathematical nature of the rules strengthens this argument. The universe doesn't just follow rules, it follows mathematical rules. The laws of physics are equations, relationships between quantities that can be expressed symbolically and manipulated algebraically. Why should reality be mathematical? There's nothing logically necessary about it. Mathematics is an abstract formal system existing in the realm of ideas. Physical reality is concrete stuff existing in space and time. Yet these two domains match up perfectly. Kaku references the observation that mathematics invented by pure mathematicians, often with no thought of physical application, routinely turns out to describe physical phenomena discovered later. Quaternions, developed in the 19th century as abstract algebra, became useful in quantum mechanics and computer graphics. Group theory, pure mathematics for decades, became essential for particle physics. Riemannian geometry, explored as mathematical curiosity, became the language of general relativity. This suggests that mathematical structures aren't human inventions, but discoveries of patterns that exist independently. And if those patterns exist independently and also structure physical reality, then perhaps physical reality is fundamentally mathematical, not described by mathematics, but actually is mathematics in some deep sense. And if reality is mathematical, then the question becomes, mathematical according to whose mind? Whose thoughts are these eternal mathematical truths? The traditional answer, going back to Plato, is that mathematical truths exist in some abstract realm, timeless and unchanging. But this just pushes the question back. Why does this abstract mathematical realm exist? How does it connect to physical reality? How can timeless abstract objects influence concrete physical events? At some point, you need a bridge between abstract and concrete, between eternal and temporal, between mathematical and physical. God, understood as cosmic intelligence, provides that bridge. If God's thoughts are mathematical, then physical reality expressing those thoughts would naturally be mathematical too. The abstract realm of mathematical truth and the concrete realm of physical existence are unified in the divine mind. The rules the universe follows are thoughts in God's mind, eternally true in the abstract realm and continually expressed in the physical realm. Kaku acknowledges this sounds philosophical or even theological rather than purely scientific, but he argues that's appropriate. Science studies phenomena within the rule-governed universe. It assumes rules exist and investigates what they are. But explaining why rules exist requires stepping outside the scientific framework into metaphysics. And in that metaphysical domain, God, as cosmic intelligence, provides the most coherent explanation. The universality of rules particularly demands explanation. The same laws of physics work in every galaxy we can observe. Light from distant stars shows the same spectral lines as light from nearby sources, indicating the same atomic physics operates there. The cosmic microwave background radiation reveals that the universe was uniform to one part in 100,000 shortly after the Big Bang. How did the entire universe coordinate to follow the same rules? In an inflationary cosmology, different regions of the early universe were causally disconnected, unable to influence each other because they were expanding faster than light could travel between them. Yet they all followed identical laws. There was no physical mechanism for them to synchronize their behavior. This suggests the rules weren't established through physical processes at all. They were built in from the beginning, or more accurately, they underlie the beginning itself. If the rules existed before the universe, or more precisely, if they're the foundation on which the universe is built, then they must transcend physical reality. They can't be products of physical processes because they're prerequisites for physical processes to occur. This transcendent status of rules points toward a transcendent source, something beyond and prior to the physical universe, something that can establish rules before there's anything physical for those rules to govern. Kaku sees this as essentially what theology means by creation. God creates not by assembling physical stuff, but by establishing the rules that allow physical stuff to exist and behave coherently. The rules come first, logically, if not temporally. They're the blueprint, the operating system, the constitution of reality. And blueprints require architects, operating systems require programmers, constitutions require authors. The specificity of rules adds another dimension to this argument. It's not just that rules exist, it's that these particular rules exist. The universe could follow any number of different mathematical structures. String theory suggests there might be 10 to the 500th power, different possible configurations, different rule sets, different universes. Out of this incomprehensibly vast landscape of possibilities, one specific set of rules actualizes as our universe. Why this set? What selects one configuration out of countless possibilities? If the selection were random, we'd expect typical generic rules. But the rules we actually have are remarkably special. They permit complexity, stability, and consciousness. They're fine-tuned across multiple parameters to fall within narrow ranges that allow interesting things to happen. This doesn't look like random selection. It looks like deliberate choice. Some invoke the multiverse as an explanation. If all possible rule sets exist as different universes, we obviously find ourselves in one with rules that permit observers. It's an anthropic selection effect. But Kaku notes this doesn't really explain anything. It just multiplies the mystery. Now, instead of explaining why our universe has these rules, you have to explain why the multiverse exists, what meta-rules govern it, and how it generates universes with different rules. You've replaced one set of rules requiring explanation with a larger set of meta-rules requiring explanation. The God hypothesis, in contrast, stops the regress. God is the necessary being, the ground of all contingent existence, requiring no further explanation because existing by necessity rather than contingency. This isn't special pleading. Any explanatory system must bottom out somewhere, must reach something that explains everything else without itself requiring explanation. For science, that stopping point is usually the laws of nature. For metaphysics, it's God or ultimate reality or absolute consciousness, different names for the same concept of necessary ground. Kaku argues that grounding explanation in God is more satisfying than grounding it in brute physical laws, because God, as intelligence, can provide intentional explanations. Physical laws just are. They have no purpose, no goals, no reasons. They simply exist, and things follow from them mechanically. But if rules come from intelligence, then there can be reasons for the rules, purposes they serve, intentions behind their specific character. The purpose Kaku sees is the generation of complexity and consciousness. The rules permit the universe to be interesting, to evolve structure, to produce life and awareness. A universe with different rules would be sterile, either collapsing immediately, expanding too fast for structure to form, or settling into boring equilibrium. The actual rules we have are just right for generating the richness we observe. This looks like purpose, like the rules were chosen to accomplish something. Critics argue this is anthropic reasoning, selecting evidence to fit a conclusion. We observe rules that permit complexity, because if the rules didn't permit complexity, we wouldn't be here to observe anything. True enough, Kaku admits. But that doesn't explain why rule-governed universes exist at all, or why the particular rules that do exist are elegant and mathematical rather than arbitrary and chaotic. The elegance of rules particularly impresses Kaku. Einstein's field equations, Maxwell's equations, the Schrödinger equation, all possess extraordinary mathematical beauty. They're simple, symmetric, powerful, explaining vast domains with minimal assumptions. This elegance isn't necessary for rules to work. Rules could be complicated, ugly, brute force solutions that get the job done without any aesthetic appeal. But actual physical laws consistently show elegance. Why should the universe care about elegance? Why should rules be beautiful rather than functional but ugly? The only satisfying answer is that there's an aesthetic intelligence behind the rules, something that can appreciate and choose mathematical beauty. Random processes don't generate elegant solutions. They generate whatever works, however messy. Elegant solutions require intelligence that recognizes and prefers elegance. Physicists use elegance as a guide to truth. When multiple theories could explain observations, they bet on the most elegant one, and historically they've been right to do so. The most elegant formulation usually turns out to be correct. The universe appears to be constructed according to principles of mathematical aesthetics, and aesthetic principles require an aesthetic sense, a mind capable of appreciating beauty. The consistency of rules across time raises additional questions. The laws of physics appear to be the same now as they were 13 billion years ago. We can observe light from distant galaxies that left those galaxies when the universe was young, and the physics encoded in that light matches current physics exactly. How do rules persist unchanged across cosmic timescales? If rules were emergent properties of the physical universe, products of physical processes, we'd expect them to evolve and change as the universe evolves and changes. But they don't. They remain fixed, eternal, unchanging. This suggests rules exist outside time, in some eternal realm. They're not in time but govern time. They don't change because they're not temporal entities subject to change. Kaku connects this to classical theology's understanding of God as eternal, existing outside time, unchanging. The rules that govern temporal reality must themselves be atemporal. They must exist in an eternal now, all times equally present. And if rules are thoughts in the divine mind, then God's eternal nature explains the eternal nature of rules. The intelligibility of rules to human minds also requires explanation. We can understand the rules. Not completely, not perfectly, but substantially. With enough study, with mathematical training and experimental verification, humans can grasp the laws governing reality and use them to predict and manipulate nature. Why should our minds be capable of this? Evolutionary psychology suggests our cognitive abilities evolved to help us survive and reproduce, not to understand quantum mechanics or general relativity. Yet we can understand these things, even though they have no relevance to evolutionary fitness. A brain that evolved to track prey, find mates, and avoid predators somehow can also comprehend the mathematical structure of space-time and the wave function of the universe. This suggests a deep connection between human rationality and cosmic rationality, between the intelligence that establishes rules and the intelligence that comprehends them. If both come from the same source, if human minds are expressions of cosmic mind, then it makes sense that we can understand the rules. We're not separate observers trying to figure out an alien system. We're the universe understanding itself, cosmic intelligence examining its own nature through countless conscious perspectives. Kaku draws on quantum mechanics for further support. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics suggests that conscious observation plays a fundamental role in actualizing definite states from quantum superpositions. Without observation, quantum systems exist as clouds of probability. Observation collapses the wave function, selecting one possibility and making it real. If consciousness is necessary for the universe to exist in definite form, then mind isn't separate from or opposed to physical rules. Mind and physical reality are interconnected, perhaps even aspects of the same underlying thing. The rules govern how quantum probabilities evolve, but consciousness selects which probabilities actualize. The universe requires both rule and observer, law and mind, cosmic intelligence establishing possibilities and conscious beings actualizing specific outcomes. This participatory model of reality blurs the distinction between physical and mental, objective and subjective. The universe isn't purely objective physical stuff governed by rules. It's a dynamic interaction between rule-governed possibilities and consciousness actualizing those possibilities. And if that's true, then the ultimate ground of reality must include both aspects, rules and the intelligence that establishes and observes them. The alternative, pure materialism, says rules somehow emerged from matter, and consciousness somehow emerged from complex material systems following those rules. But this has the causal chain backwards. Matter requires rules to behave consistently and permit complexity. Consciousness requires specific physical structures, yes, but the rules that allow those structures to exist must come first. And rules don't emerge spontaneously from nothing. They require a source. Kaku also addresses the question of mathematical necessity. Some mathematical truths seem necessarily true. 2 plus 2 must equal 4 in any possible universe. The Pythagorean theorem holds in any space with Euclidean geometry. These aren't contingent facts that could be otherwise. They're necessary truths embedded in the structure of logical possibility itself. If some mathematical truths are necessary, and physical rules are mathematical, are physical rules necessary too? Could the universe have different rules, or must it have these rules? This is deeply controversial. Some argue physical rules are contingent, could be different in other universes or circumstances. Others argue they're necessary, flowing from deeper logical or mathematical necessities. Kaku leans towards seeing rules as necessary in some sense, but not in a blind mechanical sense. They're necessary because they flow from the nature of cosmic intelligence, from God's essential character. God couldn't create a universe that violates mathematical necessity, because God's nature is mathematical rationality itself. The rules are necessary because they're expressions of divine nature, and divine nature is what it necessarily is. This solves the problem of why these rules and not others. They're not arbitrary choices from infinite possibilities. They're the rules that must be because they express the nature of the necessary being that grounds all reality. Other configurations aren't just unchosen. They're impossible because they would contradict the essential nature of the source. Of course, this is speculative metaphysics, not empirical science. Kaku admits that. But he argues it's reasonable speculation, inference to the best explanation. Given that the universe has rules, that those rules are mathematical and elegant, that they permit complexity and consciousness, that they're universal and eternal, that they're comprehensible to intelligent minds, the most coherent explanation is cosmic intelligence. God as the ground and source of rule-governed reality. The practical implications of this view are profound. If the universe has rules because of cosmic intelligence, then studying those rules is a way of knowing that intelligence. Physics becomes natural theology. Every equation understood, every experiment conducted, every phenomenon explained is insight into the divine nature. Scientists aren't secular materialists studying dead matter. They're engaged in the most profound spiritual practice, understanding the mind of God as expressed through the rules governing existence. This transforms the meaning and purpose of scientific inquiry. It's not just about gaining power over nature or satisfying curiosity. It's about relationship with the ultimate, communion with cosmic intelligence, participating in the divine life by understanding divine thoughts. The rules are revelations, windows into transcendent reality, invitations to know the source of all that is. Kaku sees no conflict between this view and rigorous scientific practice. The same experiments are performed, the same mathematics is used, the same standards of evidence apply. What changes is the interpretation, the larger context in which science operates. Instead of being the only valid form of knowledge, science becomes one path among others toward understanding reality, complementing rather than contradicting religious and philosophical insights. The mystery remains, of course. Even if God explains why rules exist, questions remain about the nature of God, how eternal rules relate to temporal events, why consciousness exists, and countless other deep problems. But explaining why the universe has rules at all represents progress, a framework that makes sense of this fundamental feature of reality. For Kaku, the conclusion is clear. The universe has rules because something established those rules, something with the intelligence to conceive mathematical structures and the power to instantiate them as physical reality. That something, whether we call it God, cosmic intelligence, absolute mind, or ultimate reality, is the most reasonable explanation for why chaos doesn't reign, why order prevails, why reality plays by rules at all. And understanding those rules, decoding the mathematical language in which they're written, reveals the thoughts of the cosmic intelligence that thought them into being. That's why physics matters, because it lets us read the mind of God, one rule at a time.